But first, we do want to check in now with our very own News 8 political reporter, Rick Albin. Rick, you've had quite, I would say, pretty easy, very non-stressful past couple of days dealing with the fact that we still don't have a budget passed here in the state of Michigan. The deadline has already passed. Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed a continuation budget that really only lasts a week, giving lawmakers hopefully enough time to come to an agreement and get that budget onto our desk. It is now October 2nd. That deadline has passed. Where do we stand as of today? And really, what kind of happens next over the next couple of hours?
Well, I wish I had a better idea of what was going to happen in the next few hours, but here's what we know. There is a budget agreement. And in fact, I have this sense and have been told that it's pretty well put together and they kind of know where all the pieces go and how much is going to be spent and that type of thing. But there are still some things that have to happen. And some of those things take time. Now, we believe by now that the budget should be printed. It should have been checked and everybody should have been able to look at it. I don't know if it's been distributed to members yet or not. I got a fair amount of information about it yesterday evening, so we know some of what's in that budget. But it depends on a lot of things. For example, there's an assumption of more than $400 million in new revenue with taxes on cannabis, and that still has to pass the Senate because that budget assumes that money to get the roads deal done. So that's a big part of that. And then you have to make sure that you have all your members in place, and today is a holiday, Yom Kippur, and so there are some members that are out. So what is happening right now is that the House and Senate have both gavelled in. The House this morning at 10 o'clock, the Senate at noon, and then they immediately went to recess, the call of the chair. So over in the Senate, they can call them back anytime. Over in the House, which you're looking at there, they're coming back at 1:30. It's not clear what they're going to do because we know not all of their members are there, and I think they will wait until everybody returns after sundown, and that's when those votes would start happening, but I don't know that for a fact. I also know that, all of this has to happen kind of, I wouldn't say all at once, but everybody's got to be working at the same time, and you have to have those assurances that both chambers will pass the bill so you don't make your particular members take a bad vote if it's not going to clear the other chamber. So those are some of the things that we're working with right now.
And of course, you touched on a few things that may be some holdups or really kind of the main focus of what both sides of the aisle, both, lawmakers from both parties are really trying to work towards. Do we really know anything else additional about what is in this budget or potentially what we could end up seeing when a final budget is passed?
Yeah, so I brought in a little aid here that I can use. This is called the Citizens Guide. And if you go to the back of this, it gives you all of the appropriations subcommittees. I'm just going to read some of these for you. Each one of these would be a bill in itself. There are about 14 separate bills. We think they'll all be wrapped up in what's called an omnibus bill, so they'll all be voted on at the same time, or at least that's the way we would expect it to be. Here are the Senate Appropriations Subcommittees: Agriculture and Natural Resources, Corrections and Judiciary, Department of Health and Human Services, EAGLE, General Government, Joint Capital Outlay, Laura, Leo, MDE, MILEAP, Military Veterans, State Police, Pre-K, and which is, again, there's a separate school aid fund that will be the other thing they'll be voting on, transportation, and universities and colleges. So each one of those bills will be included, so I have no idea what some of those will be. But what we do know, and we've already talked about this, that there'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion, and that will be for roads. That may be more like 1.9 billion in there somewhere. And again, it depends a little bit on what the revenues are like when and if that cannabis tax goes into effect. We also know, and this is not a small thing, that there will be no income tax on tips, on overtime, and significantly for Social Security. So if you know someone, or if you are on Social Security and this all passes, it's like getting a 4% increase, because that's about what it is that comes out of your check. So all of those are things that we've already known. Now there is more. You've heard about so-called phantom or ghost jobs that had been appropriated for, but no one was hired, but the money was still going into the agency. 2,000 of those would be eliminated. And it's not jobs, it's the appropriations for jobs. 2,000 of those would be eliminated in this budget, according to House Republican sources. Also a change to earmarks. So it used to be if you wanted a special project, you could put it in the budget and it could go through and your name might not necessarily be attached to it. Now, if you introduce it, your name is going to be on it. It's a little transparency thing. They're also going to restore funding, I should say, for school safety and mental health. That had been slashed like 90% or 80%, something like that. It's back up to $321 million, and that goes for exactly what you think it would. And at this time, that seems like an expenditure that many people would see as valuable. There are also other things in here. There's the per pupil funding, which is a big thing. It's the highest ever, $10,050, and free breakfast and free lunch will return with this new budget. I think on balance, most schools have continued that with the assurance it will be a line item in this budget. It's in there. They still got to get it passed. And there's a bunch of other stuff, including $26 million for Selfridge Air Force Base for that new F-15 the mission that's coming there that President Trump came and talked with the governor earlier this year. And there's a bunch more in there. I mean, it's 800 pages and we've got 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, you can kind of see hearing you talk about it, just the complexities surrounding this and trying to get everything done in time. And of course, we now know that lawmakers were unable to get that budget passed before that deadline. And as I touched on earlier, Governor Gretchen Whitmer signing that continuation budget for another week, but that expires on October 8th. What happens if, say, we still are at a crossroads and we still don't have a budget passed and we hit that October 8th deadline? Then what happens? Could the governor potentially sign another continuation budget? Or I guess really what are those next steps?
Well, I mean, she can't sign it if the legislature doesn't pass it. And if they can't agree to pass what they already agreed upon, I would be skeptical that they would get a new continuation agreement to get to her. I don't want to predict that there's going to be a shutdown if this doesn't happen, but it would be such a breach of the agreements that they've reached so far, and there are already enough hard feelings in Lansing. I just don't know if you can put all of that aside. Maybe, hopefully. I mean, a government shutdown doesn't benefit anybody. I mean, all taxpayers should not want that to happen, and not because you have to love what they're doing in Lansing and not because you love paying taxes, but you just need that continuity. And so for somebody who's sitting out there and says, I don't care if government shuts down. I understand your point of view, but there are certain things that we have to have as a society, and many of those, rightly or wrongly, come from state government. So I don't want to think about what happens if we get to Wednesday and we don't have a budget that's already been agreed to, but we can't pass it.
Well, I guess that does beg the final question for you, Rick. I mean, how optimistic are you from what you've heard from your sources at the legislature and the people that you've gotten to interview about a budget actually getting passed by that next deadline next Wednesday?
You know, everybody I talk to is optimistic. And most of the people I talk to like something in the budget. There are people who don't like the idea that you're going to raise taxes. There are people who were protesting at the Capitol this week who didn't want to raise taxes on marijuana. They were from the industry, and they claim that they'll lose a lot of jobs. And, that's a question that needs to be answered. But as it is now, that is part of the process. That is part of this budget deal. So at some point, that vote's going to have to be taken. I assume that happens over in the Senate today, though I have no prior knowledge that it will. It just seems logical that it would. I think, and I'm going to remain optimistic, I think that we are well above the 80th percentile that this will get done. And let me point this out. We've been sitting and waiting. I sat in both of the chambers you're looking at on the screen right now for hours this week. And by the way, they weren't full like this. All these folks were in meetings and talking about the budget in different levels. But it's going to be another long day over there. And once they get started, it could go pretty quickly. If all the agreements hold, if everybody shows up, if everybody's on board, realistically, after you get done with some of the implementation budgets that include voting on that tax increase, you really only have 3 votes, well, 4 votes, I guess, that you have to take. So you have the omnibus bill, which is all of it, and then you have the school aid fund, which is all schools, that includes that per pupil funding that I talked to you about. And then in the Senate, you actually have a physical vote for immediate effect, which is a 2/3 vote, I think. That means that those budgets can go in place right now. They don't have to wait until after the session, which would do no good. So you have to get immediate effect. Over in the House, it's the same thing, but the immediate effect is not as formal. It's not a vote that goes up on the board. It's just a voice vote. So you're talking about 3 votes, 4 votes when you consider immediate effect after the implementation bills are done. If everything goes right, that could happen in a big hurry. Now, here's a spoiler alert. Not everything goes right in Lansing. So I'm not exactly sure. I am optimistic. I think it'll happen. I don't know if it's going to happen tonight. I don't know if it's going to happen in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. Very often when they have difficult things to do, they happen at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I've often believed people, including reporters, get sick of sitting in the chamber.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I'll vote for this. Let's go. So we'll see. I hope it's easier than that, because this has been negotiated in a pretty tight package, I think. So hopefully everybody will stay on track.
Well, we definitely love to hear the optimism from you, Rick. And of course, we thank you so much. You've been on top of really everything going on in Lansing right now. So again, we thank you for all your reporting and also stopping by and kind of explaining where we stand right now today. So
Always
thank you for
enjoy
doing
it.
that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.